As summer of year 1709 turned into autumn, everything around Polish-Lithuanian Republic seemed to be going according to Assembly's plans. Taking advantage of the freshly finished harvest, a new agrarian reform, thought up by Minister Daniłowicz and his magistrates, was being enacted to ensure steady supply of food for the now stable Republic. All across the country, farms large and small were reorganized to take full advantage of the four-field crop rotation system, a newest idea to come out of Gardiner University that, unlike formerly used three-field system, allowed to use the fields continuously without the need for a fallow year on each field. More than that, crops used in the four-field system, wheat, turnips, barley and clover, allowed farmers to both grow crops and breed livestock, as one field was always used for a grazing plant. And as livestock breeding was more and more popular in the Republic, due to seemingly endless demand of cloth workshops, the reform meant that farmers were able to increase their income by breeding sheep, but without sacrificing the ability to grow food crops as well, greatly increasing stability of Republican food supply. In the meantime, far in the west, on the Caribbean islands, final preparations for creation of Commonwealth's first trading company were being made. Soon, in early days of October 1709, the Caribbean Charter was founded, and in true Republican spirit it was to be governed by a committee of free men, as Poniatowski's action teach Assembly to not hand all power over distant lands to a single individual. The first two officials appointed for the job were Admiral Bobrowski and General Lichorobiec. The first one's job was to ensure shipping lanes were secure and Republican traders unharmed as they sailed across the Atlantic. The second commanded land forces and protected the main source of Charter's wealth, the plantations scattered across the islands. Lichorobiec was also responsible for increasing the size of his forces by pressing local population into his army and training them to match European standards. And a third man was a civilian overseer, representative of Ministry of Finances appointed by the Assembly, and his job was to ensure the Charter would prosper and bring profit back to the Republic. In theory, this triumvirate was set up to make all three governors dependent on each other, and to ensure not a single one of those officials could gain enough power to threaten the Assembly. But the reality, as always, proved to be far different than the plan devised in a faraway capital. When first civilian governor arrived in Curaçao, instead of partners he found Admiral and General already bickering between each other, arguing over funds and limited manpower, and after few months of inconclusive banter, a request for agents of Ministry of Public Decency was sent back to Europe. And though their dreaded presence discouraged many locals from throwing their lot with the Republic, it also forced arguing officers to work together, if only for fear of accusation. But all that was merely a secondary concern for the Assembly, as their gaze was turned to the east, where a silent secession was brewing. Although it wasn't, at the time, known to general population, General Poniatowski, Republic's greatest military commander and conqueror of Berlin, was wanted by the Assembly for crimes committed against their agents. However, simply bringing Poniatowski in for interrogation was out of the question. For one, the general, known for his pride, was not too eager to submit himself to the will of bureaucrats who, in his opinion, shouldn't mess in military affairs. Two, thanks to Poniatowski's previous exploits, and to propaganda he spread to paint himself in a better light, he was revered by the population, who saw him as a man who could single-handedly deal with all enemies of the Republic. And three, Poniatowski's soldiers, after fighting under the young general for many years, were fiercely loyal to their commander. And so, by trying to put Poniatowski to justice, Assembly risked a civil war, which had the potential of splitting the new nation apart. And so a new plan was needed. In his journal, uncovered almost 300 years after his death, President Poleska wrote, "I am torn between my will to be a just man and my responsibility to the Republic. On one hand, Poniatowski's plot was a vile, heinous act of murder against people who committed no crime. But on the other hand, it allowed me to uncover the corruption among my very own friends, giving me a chance to stamp it out. And yet, by publicly agreeing with Poniatowski's version of events, I condemned the memory of those he murdered to dishonor, as they will forever be remembered as those who spied for Swedish king. Poniatowski should pay especially for that, but the man will never submit to our authority, not unless he is forced on a field of battle. That is something we, the Republic, cannot afford. If we have to back down a little, we will, but we must resolve this matter now before it starts to fester. I will not rest until I find a peaceful solution." Thus, in summer 1709, General Stolarski was sent to Moscow with an offer of amnesty, and shortly after him, messengers were dispatched to garrisons in Lithuania, Belarus, Ingria and Ukraine to prepare the border forces in case of Poniatowski's violent refusal. Weeks passed in silent anxiety. Undercover patrols were sent deep into Russia to look for even a slightest hint of Poniatowski's army. They returned with nothing. Then, in late September, 2 months after Stolarski's departure, a messenger rode into Warsaw with news. Horsemen were spotted crossing Lithuanian border. Within a day, entirety of Republican cavalry was sent northeast in a loose formation, trying to confirm the report. 3 days later, they found what they were looking for. 2 companies of richly dressed cavalrymen, Poniatowski and Stolarski's retinue. The 2 generals, after long deliberations, finally returned home. Back in Warsaw, every member of the assembly breathed a sigh of relief. There would be peace. And perhaps surprisingly, the amnesty offer was genuine, and as Poniatowski rode into capital, he was greeted by excited crowds who cheered him as a national hero as he rode into Warsaw Main Square, where he was officially appointed a Great Marshal of Eastern Provinces. Yet, despite being showered with honors he so much craved, many eyewitnesses from the day report that Poniatowski seemed sullen and disappointed, both during his triumphant ride into the city and then during the ceremony, and he quietly rode out back to Moscow the very next day. Some believe that he was broken, others that he wanted to be as far away from politicians so he could bide his time and wait for an opportunity to become the most important man in the Republic. But regardless of his motives, one thing was sure: there was finally peace. And because of this peace, the assembly could finally lower their guard, and for the first time since they took power in 1701, Republican government announced that a general election to the assembly would take place mid-November. And it's a true sign of assembly's organizational skills that, despite announcing the elections less than 2 months ahead, on the election day every citizen of core Republican territory, Poland, Lithuania, Pomerania and Belarus, was able to cast his vote. Then the votes were carried back to Warsaw, and on December 7th, 1709, the assembly that had already ruled for 8 years won themselves another 4-year term by a landslide. Such victory, paired with arrival of long-awaited peace, emboldened Republican rulers who threw themselves to work, eager to reform the nation without constantly worrying about raging war. New reforms were being enacted with breathtaking speed, as half measures implemented during first years of the Republic were cast out and replaced with more efficient and permanent solutions. But of all the edicts passed during this term, one stood out among the rest as a first declaration of human rights in the known world. The so-called Citizenship Edict not only guaranteed personal freedoms and civil rights to every citizen of Polish-Lithuanian Republic, it also made citizenship obtainable by people who lived outside of core territories, or foreigners provided they had permanent residency and paid taxes. The edict also greatly reduced power of Ministry of Public Decency, who could no longer condemn and execute people without proper investigation. However, while all those things happened in the spotlight, in one small village in northern Poland another revolution was brewing, slowly, quietly and meticulously. But when it finally erupted, its effects were felt across the world. In that small village lived a young blacksmith who inherited the smithy when his father died defending Prussian beaches from Hanoverian invaders. Unfortunately, his son was weak, and so the smithy performed poorly as the man wasn't able to work long hours like his predecessor. But on one evening, shortly before the war with Sweden broke out, this young man was struck by an inspiration as he was watching the lid jumping up and down as water boiled in a kettle. In a single moment, the young man realized the potential of power right in front of him and immediately set off to figure out how to harness it. For years he experimented with steam, trying to force it to do his bidding, and finally, in late 1710, he arrived in University of Gardines, ready to present his invention, a steam engine powering a massive hammer that could enable even the weakest of men to work as a blacksmith. The scholars were dazed by the contraption, and a note describing the machine was sent to Warsaw, where it caused a rush of excitement. Józef Anton Daniłowicz, Minister of Finances, arrived together with always knowledge-hungry President Oleska, and when they saw what this young blacksmith's invention was capable of, they immediately called Gardina's board of professors and ordered them to focus all their efforts on perfecting this technology and finding more ways it could be used. Finally, in summer of year 1711, officially appointed blueprint of industrial steam engine was released to the public, causing production to skyrocket. Within just 3 years, steam engines became a common sight in Republican lands, powering everything from cloth mills and irrigation pumps to mines and foundries. Some rumors even surfaced that Assembly's new Russian Minister of the Navy was looking for a way to use steam for military purposes. But while peace and prosperity reigned in the north, just beyond Republic's southern border, chaos and war still raged, as deadly back and forth between Holy Roman Empire and Ottomans continued for over a decade. Entire southeastern part of Europe became a desolate, war-torn wasteland, devastated by armies marching in all directions, never being able to gain the advantage they needed to push through, to the point that levels of devastation and the population around the area were comparable to those caused by 30 Years' War in Germany. And so population began leaving the Balkans, hoping to find refuge from seemingly endless onslaught. And while some of those people remained in their countries, the introduction of citizenship edict lured many of those refugees into Republican lands, and trouble started brewing almost immediately. While many of those refugees genuinely hoped to escape the chaos of war, others had far more sinister plans. Many groups simply seek to bring their conflict along with them, and soon all across the Commonwealth, minorities from Serbia, Romania, Bulgaria, Turkey, Greece and Austria began fighting among themselves, forcing Republican armies to step in, an act that managed to quell the unrest, but also fermented more discontent among people who were now part of the Republic. But more importantly, realizing how hard it would be for Commonwealth's government to keep track of all those refugees, some nations sent among them their own agents whose sole role was to undermine the newly founded superpower from within. And one of those agents managed to deal the Republic a blow so devastating, its effect would cause a chain reaction that changed the world forever. In early November 1714, shortly before second elections, President Ulrich Poleska retired into his Warsaw mansion after a long political rally, the last one before the big day. And though age and responsibility weighed heavy on him, President was happy, for according to latest polls his assembly would win another term without trouble. But as he entered his home, he was immediately shot by an assassin who was waiting inside. In a twist of fate, the wound was not fatal, and so the entire board of medicine, led by famous Swedish doctor Holger Sture, was called to save President's life. For 3 days and 3 nights the doctors fought against infections and blood loss, but ultimately, in early hours of November 11th, the election day, President Ulrich Poleska passed away, leaving his republic 13 years after he created it. And everything would have turned into chaos, with blame and accusations being thrown around the assembly, if not for the fact that the assassin had slipped and got caught by members of the honor guard. Every member of the assembly arrived to take part in his interrogation, and after a few days the truth was finally revealed. The assassin was hired by agents of Kaiser Leopold. An assassination of President Poleska was supposed to be a retaliatory strike for all the support Republic had sent to Ottoman Empire, who in the past few months managed to gain the upper hand in their war. When the news were presented to the public, the nation boiled. Crowds took to the streets, and soon refugees from Austria found themselves in the crosshairs of angry mobs. Blood was spilled and thousands of lives were lost, but even that was not enough. The entire Republic, from farmers and factory workers to wealthy merchants and senators, called for justice, and so Republic's future course has been set. But the nation still needed someone to steer it. With the election postponed, the assembly had to find another candidate, as not one of its old members felt confident enough to lead the nation in this trying hour. And from many candidates that were proposed, one man stood out as a perfect fit for the task at hand. Ever since his return from Sweden, Sebastian Stolarski, former general of Republican Honor Guard, became more and more popular among the citizens with every passing day, thanks to his approachable and amicable nature, not to mention the fact that, unlike General Poniatowski, the other candidate for presidential seat, Stolarski was not a noble. And so, in early December 1714, his candidature was finally approved, and in early days of 1715 he was officially elected as president by almost unanimous vote. Then, in a fiery speech printed and published all across the Republic, he immediately issued his first edict, an order for mass mobilization. In spring, the edict proclaimed, he, the President General of the Republic, would lead her armies to bring Holy Roman Emperor to justice. And so the die has been cast, and soon Europe would know the war like it never happened before. Gentlemen, allow me to begin this meeting by saying that it's an honor to have you all here under one roof. And I know that our late President Ulrich would have been honored as well, for you, friends, are nothing less than his dream coming true. You are the best of the best, the greatest military minds our Republic has to offer. You are the first cadre of officers who, like myself and great General Prasmovsky, reached highest military ranks not because of your birth or connections, but because of your skills and accomplishments. More, unlike us and thanks to President Ulrich's dream, you had the privilege of improving your skills free of noble oversight that plagued our military for so long. And because of that, I am humbled to see you here standing beside me, ready to protect our freedoms. And make no mistake, they need to be defended. Ever since we've driven this so-called King August away from Poland and overthrown noble anarchy that nearly ruined our land, our enemies abroad gave us no time to rest. First, Hanoverians, backed by gold provided by the perfidious King of Britain and Netherlands, tried to destroy our republic in its first days and extinguish the candle of freedom before it was truly lit. But they failed. Then, the monarch of Sweden, the enemy who already once brought us to the brink of ruin, tried to strangle Republic's blossoming economy by confining us to the Baltic. But he failed. And then, trying to prey on us in our weakest moment, the vile Russian Tsar ordered his boyars to once again bring our nation under Moscow's heel. But they failed. And now, my fellow officers, the Emperor of Holy Roman Empire itself tried to sow chaos in our republic by assassinating its founding father in his very home. And although the assassin had succeeded in his task, his master, Kaiser Leopold, like all those mighty monarchs before him, will fail. For if he plans to use President's death to cause fraction in our republic, you need only to look out of the window to realize his failure has already begun. Instead of chaos, there is unity. Instead of despair, there is determination. Instead of opportunism and greed, there is charity. Look at the lines to recruitment officers. Look at the headlines of the newspapers. The entire nation calls for justice, my friends, and it is up to us to exact it. But I want you to know that my heart is heavy. I know what must be done, but I'm also very much aware of the consequences. The conflict that is about to start will be unlike any other any one of us have ever seen. The Habsburgs may be weak, but their influence reaches far, entangling courts of Europe like a spider's web. As we strike at Emperor's forces, his allies will come down this web, ready to protect the heart of Austrian Empire. The British will send their mighty fleets to contest our mastery of the waves. The Dutch will ruin our trade. The republics of Venice and Genoa will fight us using their gold, filling Austrian ranks with unaccountable mercenaries. We even risk excommunication from the Pope himself. It will not be a regular conflict, but a total war, and some of you might think that it's madness to throw ourselves against the entire world. All I can say to that, friends, is this: take heart, for we are not alone in our struggle. Over the last few years, our financial and material support helped Ottomans regain many of their lost lands, and now the Sultan has pledged his forces to our cause. They will continue to push north, keeping imperial armies occupied, giving us an opportunity to strike. In India, the endless armies of Mughal Empire are ready to join the fight as well, waiting only for our fleets to create an opening, so they could sail forth and exact revenge on their former British oppressors. And in Americas, great native tribes are gathering for the greatest warpath in known history, eager to throw those who took their lands back into the sea. But always remember that despite all those allies, it is we who must carry the greatest burden. We must provide our friends with opportunities, material, but most importantly, hope. And so I beg you that, once you return to your units, you never lose that hope. I beg you to always push forward, no matter how bleak the situation may seem, for it is the only way we'll be able to keep our freedom. There's a monumental task in front of us, gentlemen. We are about to drag the entire world into war, so I wish you all good luck, and may we all see each other again on the other side.